Alright, section 1.4, properties of real numbers. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is the commutative property of addition and multiplication. So the commutative property, if you take a look here, okay, it is where you change the order you add in. So let's just draw a line to separate them here. Okay, so on the left side, I am taking A plus B. Okay, and I'm saying that that is equal to adding in the different order B plus A. Okay, that is the commutative property. Okay, when you change the order, think commute. You're commuting to school, and then you turn around and you go from school back home. So you're changing the order you do things in. Okay, same thing with multiplication. You're just changing the order. So you're taking A times B, and that is the same as B times A. And we can look at it without algebra and look at it simply in some numbers. Okay, if we have 2 plus 3, doesn't that equal 3 plus 2? Okay, that's the commutative property. And same with multiplication. If we have 2 times 3, that equals 3 times 2. Okay, so commutative property. Change the order you add in. Okay, the next one is associative property. Okay, the associative property, you notice, has parentheses. Now, commutative property can have parentheses too when they're trying to be a little tricky, but associative property always has to have parentheses. Okay, it'll always have parentheses. Commutative property up here, sometimes. Okay, but associative has to have parentheses. And what's going on with this is they're changing the way they group. So remember, when you do order of operations, you always do the parentheses first. Okay, so if you notice here, draw lines separating them again. If you notice, what's grouped on the left side is A plus B, but what's grouped on the right side is B plus C. Okay, so they're changing what's being added first, but it's all addition, so it doesn't change the answer. Okay, so if we look at it with some numbers, alright, if we look on here on the left, following order of operations, we would have to take 2 plus 3 first, and that would give us 5. And then 5 plus 4 is 9. Now on this side, on the right side, we would have to take 3 plus 4 first, which gives us 7. Bring down the plus 2. 2 plus 7 is 9. Okay, same answer, but what we added first was changed. Okay, that's the associative property. So associative property is when the grouping changes. Same with multiplication. Alright, and we did that with the cards. Remember when we flipped the cards over and we were playing that little war game where you had to write your number first, okay, and then your partner had to write their number first? And in addition and multiplication, they were always the same answer. Okay, this is associative property and a commutative property. Okay, alright, those should look for a little familiar. Alright, the next one are properties as well. The first one is the identity property of addition and multiplication. Now, when you think identity property, think of the number not changing. So your identity, or the identity of the number, does not change. So the identity property of addition, okay, right here. If I have an A and I want my answer to be exactly the same, what can I add to that so the identity of the number doesn't change? Okay, well, that's a 0. Okay, so when you add 0, that's the identity property of addition. Okay, so if I take 5 3/4, I add 0, I still get 5 3/4. Okay. Now multiplication is not 0, so be careful. If multiplication, if you want something not to change, so if I take that first A and I want my answer to be A, I have to multiply by a 1. Okay. So the identity property of multiplication is when you multiply by 1. Alright. Now 0 property of multiplication. That is when you just multiply by 0, and your answer will always be 0. So A times 0 is 0, and 18 times 0 is 0. So that is the 0 property of multiplication. Okay. So the next one is multiplication property of -1. Now we use this quite a bit in algebra. If we want the sign to change, we always multiply by -1. So if I take A, it's a positive number, Okay, and I multiply by -1, my answer is going to be -a. Okay. Same with 9. If I take 9 and I multiply by -1, my answer is going to be -9. Right? So the multiplication property of -1 is when you just multiply by -1. Okay, so you can also do negatives. So -1 times -8. Okay, so I have -8. If I multiply by a -1, it's just going to change my sign to a +8. Okay. All right, so let's state some properties. Okay, so A. Now, first thing I recognize is I have a 0. Okay, and I'm multiplying. Okay, now the one thing that you might think this is identity. But remember, identity is when you have your original number and your answer is the same number. So that's not the case. So this is not the identity property. Okay, and they didn't change any grouping because there's no parentheses. So that gets rid of the associative property. And the commutative property changes the way you add or multiply it. Well, they're multiplying 42 times 0 on this side. Well, they're not multiplying 0 times anything over here. Okay, so that leaves the multiplication property of 0. Okay, that is when you multiply by 0. All right, B. The first thing I look in this one is that it has parentheses, so I'm thinking associative property. It might be commutative, but let's check associative property. Associative property is when they change what's grouped. So in B, they're grouping y plus 2.5. And then on the other side, they're grouping 2.5 plus 28. And that changes. So this is the associative property of addition because it's adding. All right, next one. All right, now I don't see any parentheses and it's not commutative property. All right, so I have 10x and my answer is also 10x. So that's going to be the identity property because the identity of the number didn't change because all we did was add 0. So this is going to be the identity property of addition. Okay, all right, let's go to the next. All right, mental math. So here's where we use properties to help with mental math. Okay, so I'm not going to use a calculator. I'm not going to line up the decimals or anything like that. So a movie ticket costs $7.75. A drink costs $2.40. Popcorn costs $1.25. What is the total cost for a ticket, a drink, and popcorn? Use mental math. So with mental math and money, we always try to get things to whole dollars. Okay, so I notice that I have 75 cents here and I have 25 cents. If I combine those, it makes $1. Okay, so I'm going to add in my head $7.70 and $1.25 first. Okay, in my head. So, and I get $9. Alright. Now we have $2.40, and that is very easy to combine in my head. So it's going to cost $11.40. Okay, so that's using mental math. Right? Alright, so it says write equivalent expressions and justify using properties. Okay, so in A, what we're going to do is we're going to write the equivalent to A. So we're going to use our properties. Okay, so if I take 5 and then they group 3 in together, okay, if I change this and I group 5 and 3 together and then multiply by n, did I change the problem? Okay, I'm still going to get the same answer. Both answers are 15n. Okay, but I changed what I grouped. So this is going to be the associative property of multiplication. All right, now what about B? Okay, so I'm going to write an equivalent expression. Now they put 4 plus 7b. I can't add 4 plus 7b because they're not like terms. But I can add 4 and 8. So I'm going to change and group 4 and 8 together. Then put the 7b off to the side. Okay. So again, I change what's grouping. So this is going to be associative property as well, but of addition. Okay. All right, I hope you guys remember these and have a great day.